Alone between cars, I let the late-night Northeast Regional pull my coat like a tide. Cold air sliced through the rubber gasket and put its hands on my ribs. My phone lit the steel. Don't come. You weren't supposed to see this. The train thundered. Lights strobed the tunnel. A conductor's radio crackled with codes that sounded like orders spoken through rain. The car door shivered against my palm. Behind me, faces floated in the glass, strangers perched on their own private cliffs. Ahead, Penn Station gathered itself like a bristling promise. I had traveled for a meeting where paper would pretend to be mercy. Now, a sentence wanted me to turn back into the dark. I thought of my rule: no decisions after dark, and of the nights I survived by waiting for daylight to tell the truth. Steel sang underfoot. My heart kept its drum. I breathed the way nurses teach when storms try to use your lungs. I could step through, walk the aisle, and sign away tomorrow. I could stand here and let the miles finish their argument. I pressed my palm to the door and told the tracks, if this is real, it will stand in daylight. Sweetheart, pull your chair close. Tonight, we're talking about the New York night train. One message, and why I waited anyway. I'll pour the coffee. You bring your patience. We'll keep it plain, an American fair dealing, receipts, mercy, with a backbone. If stories like this steady you, tap subscribe and stay for Sunday at dusk. If you believe families deserve truth in full sentences, press like so this porch light reaches another home. I'm not asking for applause. I'm asking for company, because courage grows better when it eats with someone. You'll hear how a rule: no decisions after dark kept me from signing between track numbers and handed the night back its noise. You'll hear how daylight turned pressure into witnesses and a text into something we could live with, not fear. Before you judge that message, you need to know what trains used to mean in this family, and why **** evening trains are classrooms if you let them. I board by habit more than hope. Paper ticket tucked in a leather wallet that once rode 100 paydays. My thermos is hot enough to argue with winter. I sit facing forward because I like to see what I'm agreeing to. Notebook on the tray, pen clipped like a seatbelt, phone face down beside the napkin I folded twice, a quiet lid on noise. Over the aisle, the screen lists stations like stepping stones, Trenton. Small routines are armor in motion. I count the cars by the sway. I tighten my scarf when the gasket drafts. I touch the edge of my ticket as though paper can keep its promises. On the window, the night smears city lights into rivers, and the train paints itself forward. 2 snack packs come out of my bag by muscle memory: salted nuts for me, shortbread for the company I still set a place for. I set both on the tray, then remembered the cost of pretending. I put the shortbread away and keep the nuts. Habit. The rule rides with me the way a hymn rides. Breath. No decisions after dark. I learned it the expensive way, when the right signature felt like warmth and turned out to be winter. So the phone stays face down, screen tamed until morning. If anything is true at midnight, it will be truer at 9. The conductor clips my ticket with a click that sounds like a period where I might have used a comma. He nods toward Penn Station like a man who has learned what he can and cannot promise. I nod back, because I too am learning. Across the aisle, a couple whispers in a dialect made of fatigue. The car charcoal sketches their faces and moves on. I pour coffee and hold it like a lantern. Steam fogs the glass and leaves a thumbprint of warmth I can almost read. I write a list of tomorrow's steps the way nurses taught me to breathe. 1 count, 2 count, steady. Email the clerk, ask for copies, request a room with windows even if the fluorescent lights want the stage. Find my seat near the door so nerves can walk if they must. Motion is a test of memory. The train asks what you packed, and the city asks what you forgot. I packed patience and a pencil. I left behind the urge to narrate my worth to anyone who is late to it. My hands know where the zipper ends. My heart knows where the evening ends. To dot in the seatback pocket lives a small envelope with emergency cash and a card that says, "Call me before you compromise." I wrote it months ago, for nights exactly like this, when ease dresses up like wisdom. I touch it and feel steadier than coffee can make me. Overhead announcements bloom. Track work, short dwell times, stay behind the yellow line. Boundaries are painted promises. I keep mine even when the paint thins. I open the notebook and sketch the kitchen table waiting at home would grain like water. A chair pulled back like a breath. It reminds me who I am. In rooms that sell hurry, I write tomorrow's first sentence. Thank you for meeting in daylight. I underline daylight until the ink darkens into resolve. The car rocks. My thoughts line up like coins. I count what I control and stop there. Coat, voice, pen, patience. The rest I give to the rhythm that got us this far. Penn Station's ETA blinks earlier, later, earlier, like a nervous eye. I close mine and let the rails argue without me. I look at my face in the glass and see someone I trust to wait. That rule saved me once and tonight. The track asked me to break it truly. I was raised where cornfields draw their own horizons in church basements. Smell like coffee you can stand a spoon in. On Mondays the Union Hall counted hours out loud, and on Sundays the choir counted blessings in 4-part harmony. My mother carried a mantra, the way other women carry a purse. Good fences make good neighbors. She meant it. Kindly know your edge. Keep it mended. Wave from it. I learned fairness like the alphabet. Straight lines, clean corners, names spelled right. After school, I wiped chrome at the depot lunch counter until I could see my future in it. The station's brass clock clicked like a metronome for hope. Timetables taught me that promises travel in columns. If a train said 9:07, it tried its best to be the kind of creature that keeps its word. Men in work coats folded their receipts square. Women in Sunday shoes counted change and patience. He came in from the machine shop with oil on his knuckles and quiet in his eyes. He ordered coffee black, then fixed the rattling sugar caddy without announcing his skill. When he thanked me, it sounded like a handshake. He kept receipts in a rubber-banded stack and listened all the way to the end. We walked the platform on warm evenings and learned the grammar of waiting. Keep your place. Mind your bag. Let people off first. We courted like frugal travelers, 1 milkshake, 2 straws, a jukebox that needed a friendly thumb. When overtime vanished and the plant shrank, the train became our classroom. We took cheap rides to interviews 3 towns over, lunch wrapped in wax paper. The ticket agent slid advice with our change. Be early, be steady, bring your own pen. New York lived on our map like a rumor of second chances. We kept our feet in the Midwest and our eyes on the departures board. We made a few trips to the city to learn its pace, how to move in a river without losing your coat. The rules were legible. Hues, signals, names on doors. At home, the kitchen table stayed the altar. We paid bills under the salt, blessed food over the steam, and told news in full sentences so nobody had to translate mood. He would arrive, set his lunch pail down, kiss my forehead like a period, and report the day using verbs that worked. When trains ran late, he called from a payphone and apologized to the stew. Respect was measured in minutes and in the kindness of being counted. Mama's fence rule grew into my own. Doors open, door frames strong. We helped neighbors move couches, and they helped us move grief when grief came by. The station master taught us a better version of luck. Preparation, meeting timetable. When we missed a connection, we learned to read the board, not blame the rails. When we caught one by seconds, we learned to thank the seconds. We married between shifts, rings simple as sockets. Our honeymoon was light slanting in like a promise. We held hands over a map and drew a thin line from our town to New York. Not a command, a possibility. If work called us east, we'd go wisely. If life kept us planted, we'd grow shade. What those years taught me is the same thing I tell you now. Trains are not escape. They are agreements. You stand on the platform, you decide where you are going, and you accept the timetable's truth. We hoped for platforms and kept our table bright while we waited. We promised to meet at supper always until the night supper, learned to wait for a platform announcement. Marriage began between pay periods. Rings, simple as washers, vows spoken like instructions you intended to follow. We rented a walk-up that creaked kindly under our feet. The kitchen wore a coat of paint, the color of warm bread. Pay stubs curled on the counter. Metrocards nested in a bowl by the door. The table carried to Jobsalter and desk. We blessed food there and added numbers that did not love us back. Bedtime stories, learned to share space with envelopes. Our life made a quiet rhythm. Boots by the mat, keys on a hook, calendar squares penciled with hope. We saved 4 tires, bought used, and called it victory. He'd tuck a receipt under the salt, and I'd log it in pencil because pencil forgives. The baby arrived, joy that required earplugs. We measured growth on the doorframe, and patience in teaspoons. Supper was our bell. Whatever the city took, we gathered when it rang. Then, the hairline crack. Late arrivals wore hustle like a good coat. A missed call was no bars. A promise bent because a connection ran long. Once or twice became sometimes became habits. He said details were small and peace was big. I said details make peace possible. The stew went glossy with the skin while the clock stared hard. Half-truths tried out their lines. I didn't want to worry you. It wasn't worth a call. The table listened and learned subtraction. I cleaned plates I had hoped to share. He came in sorry and tired are not the same as changed. I kept my voice soft so our child would learn gentleness, and my spine straight so we would learn truth. One night, I left his bowl in the oven to keep warm and found the warmth had turned to waiting. Another night, I ate without him and realized I had chosen health over ceremony. Mercy covers once. I wrote in my notebook. Math counts the rest. I drew a doorframe around the words, so I wrote the rule that would keep me whole and taped it to the inside of my ribs. No pressure after dark. No signatures in a hurry. No disrespect where we bless food. If news can't stand the light, it can wait. I practiced it. Quiet as shoes left neatly by the door. The city kept moving. We did, too, but with a pace we could live with. He learned to call from the platform when trains hit. I learned which silences are rest and which are hiding. We found our apology drawer. We were not tragic. We were learning math. The first empty bowl taught me mercy. The second taught me math. Newark flickered up like a warning light. The car dimmed the way cars do before a stop, and the Wi-Fi stuttered like a bad alibi. My phone, face down, decided to find its courage without me. 3 small vibrations that traveled through the tray table into my wrists. I turned it over just enough to see a preview, the way you glance at thunder to confirm it isn't a truck. Hidden name, Gray Bobble. Don't come. It's signed already. The train leaned into a curve. The skyline sharpened into a blade that remembered my name. Another bubble slid in, green this time. A voicemail notification from a number with shine on it. Bang, clinic, attorney. The kind of voice that talks about efficiency like it invented time. The last time I heard for efficiency, a clerk stapled my patience to someone else's rush. I put the phone back down like a hot plate. The overhead speaker coughed up a code. Door chime. Approaching Newark. A child laughed 2 rows back. A woman in a suit rehearsed her apology to a calendar. My thermos cooled a degree. My rule, older than any conductor on this line, no decisions after dark, stood up inside my ribs and took attendance. Breath steady, hands quiet, pen capped. Another buzz signature window closes tonight. The sentence wore a tie and a smirk. I let it pass like scenery. I breathed the way nurses teach when storms try to borrow your lungs. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. Memory cued its slideshow without being asked. The night I sprinted to fix someone else's hurry. The way my name looked small under language written by a stranger. The color of the ceiling in an emergency room where consent had been assumed. The car's gasket hissed cold air, honest air slipping in through rubber and reminding me that truth prefers simple entrances. I thumbed the voicemail but did not press play. The message could hold until morning like any soup worth serving. Efficiency is often just a polite word for skip the witness. The track hummed underfoot, measuring choices in miles instead of minutes. I tilted my thermos and tasted a steadiness I paid for in small, faithful sips. I opened my notebook and wrote a sentence I've learned to trust. If it can't stand daylight, it can wait. I underlined daylight until the page looked sure of itself. The train slid past sodium lights and graffiti that spelled someone else's truth. Mine was still in my pocket, folded, waiting for a table that knows my name. The screen lit again. A final nudge, pretending to be a courtesy we can complete on arrival. Track 8. My reflection in the glass looked like a woman who has already stood in too many hallways. I set the phone face down and laid my palm on it like you calm a dog that hasn't done anything wrong. Theft doesn't begin with stealing. It begins with timing. I counted the rails ticking beneath us and let their math outvogue my fear. The door between cars shuddered. Cold kissed my ankles. I stood, stretched, and looked down the aisle at 100 private battles being waged in public. I chose not to volunteer my name as a casualty. I sat, capped my pen, and let the city draw closer without earning my signature. The message wanted my name, to tighten their terms. The call came in crooked half a bar, full of certainty. Ma'am, we can meet you at the station. 10 minutes, 1 form, you're done. The voice was practiced kindness, the sort that wears comfortable shoes to step over people. I pictured a clipboard near track 8, a signature trembling in fluorescent weather, and a stranger who would never have to eat at my table. Not tonight, I said. Not on a platform. He switched to the lever he was trained to pull. Be reasonable. I have learned that reasonable is what urgent people call you right before they borrow your backbone. I am, I said, and my tone took its coat off. Daylight, windows, witnesses. The conductor rolled through with a voice like gravel and grace. Delay ahead. Track change at Newark. The car stirred, bags zipped, coats shrugged. Collective patience thinned to a thread. Claustrophobia in motion is a special kind of test. Nothing is still and nothing progresses. I breathed with the rails. I moved to the quiet car, not because silence cures anything, but because noise sells things I don't want. A relative texted as if we were on the same team with different jerseys. Be reasonable, I replied with my creed. No night decisions. 3 dots pulsed, then disappeared. People love to argue until they meet a rule older than them. The phone rang again. A new voice, brisk as a stapler. We can expedite on arrival. Our office is open until midnight. Midnight is where paperwork learns tricks. Daylight, I repeated. Neutral room. Copies I carry out. He tried laughter. I offered quiet. Quiet one. The train idled by a cemetery that looked like patients wearing snow. I sipped thermos coffee that had lost its bravado and kept its warmth. Across the aisle, a man rehearsed forgiveness to a voicemail. 2 seats up, a teenager typed an essay like it owed him money. We were all collecting ourselves. I took out 2 snack packs again, salted nuts and shortbread, and this time I measured my heart before my hands. I set the shortbread on the tray, watched my own desire to share, apologize for being alone, and then slid it back into the bag. Not a courtroom, I told the empty seat. Not a negotiation table. Boundaries are door. I straightened them when the train sways. Another text where waiting by the taxi stand. Quick photo of ID. First page only. That's how it begins. Just a photo, just a page, just tonight. I closed my eyes and pictured my kitchen table. Wood grain, steam lifting from a bowl. The way we say grace with our hands, even when our mouths are tired. I pictured the empty chair I keep for tomorrow. The conductor announced. Track 3. Watch the gap. The car stood as one organism and then broke into its separate parts. I stayed seated, let hurry step past me, and felt the rule in my ribs hold the door. I texted back, daylight or not at all. I tucked the phone under my notebook, zippered my bag, and centered myself in the seat like a nail finding plumb. I set 1 snack on the tray, then took it back. This seat would not be a courtroom. Mara called from Midtown, traffic gossiping in the background. I'm 10 minutes from Penn, she said. I can walk you straight to the office. Sign, breathe, go home. If you loved him, you'd just sign. Love is always invited to testify. It should not be allowed to forge. I do love him, I said, and checked my voice for splinters. That's why I'm waiting. She sighed the sigh of a friend who thinks the bridge she built is better than the river you respect. It's just paperwork. I stared at the word just the way you stare at a loose step. I've broken ankles on just, I said. The train shouldered into a tunnel. Service hiccuped, then held. My memory cued its reel without permission. Winter sidewalks at 2 a.m. My scarf turned to ice while I hustled to sign something simple that later cost a month of sleep. A clinic hallway where the form had a smile and a trap. The way vanishing to keep peace teaches people to misplace you on purpose. I felt the old erasure try to take a seat. I didn't offer it a cushion. Mara changed tactics. I'm trying to help. Then meet me tomorrow, I said. Room with windows. Witnesses. You can bring cookies and opinions. She laughed, but it landed like a shiver. You're stubborn, I'm careful. Stubborn argues with everyone, careful argues with the clock. Asterisk, the message thread glowed like tunnel lights in red, unread, each bubble, a small lighthouse trying to aim me toward their harbor. I am not a ship for rent. What if waiting makes it worse? Mara asked, softer now. Waiting makes daylight, I said. Daylight makes witnesses. Our call crackled. A conductor's radio stepped on our conversation with codes and place names. Listen, she tried again. I'm downstairs. I can meet you at the taxi stand. 10 minutes. 10 minutes is how life opens its purse and counts out your future in nickels. Tomorrow, I said, or not at all. I ended the call with love, which is to say I let it be small enough to fit through the door of morning. I folded my paper itinerary in half, then in half again, like a prayer I intended to carry. The car door hissed behind me. Heavy shoes stopped at my row. A coat that had borrowed authority cleared its throat. You, Grandma. He used my first name next, and urgency held his hat. I did not stand. I did not smile to make his job easier. The message thread glowed. The skyline pressed its lights against the window as if it were trying to read my mind. I placed the itinerary on the tray, squared it with the table's edge, and felt my shoulders choose a side I could live with. I folded the paper itinerary, then heard the car door hiss and heavy shoes stop at my row. He slid into the row across from me without waiting for invitation. a manila envelope tucked under his arm like a verdict. "We've got a table in the cafe car," he said, voice pitched for urgency and audience. 5 minutes and we're clear." He glanced down the aisle as if collecting witnesses who didn't know they'd been hired. "Coffee first," I said, "and daylight." He blinked. "We don't have daylight, then we don't have signatures." He pressed the envelope toward me until it touched the edge of my notebook. "It's standard," he promised. "They'll fix the fine print tomorrow." "Tomorrow is where neglect rents a room." "Read me the lines about appeal," I said. He flipped. The paper rustled without answering. "Read me the clause where silence becomes consent." He tried twice and failed both times. He turned the page and pointed to a smiley paragraph about efficiency. I slid it back with a single finger. "That's not a clause. That's a pitch." His jaw worked. "If we miss tonight, we lose the window." I sipped my thermos because warmth helps verbs behave. "If we sign tonight, I lose my name." Around us, the car negotiated its own drama strollers, laptops, whispers, a couple ending something under their breath, but our small table had become a stage. He reached into the envelope for a pen. I reached for the call button. The blue halo blinked awake like a witness. He frowned. "There's no need to involve staff." "There is," I said, "when pressure borrows manners." The attendant arrived with the patient face of a person trained to keep trains from becoming courtrooms. "Everything okay here?" "We're moving this to morning," I said. "Room with windows, witnesses, copies." The man cut in. "We just need her signature." The attendant looked at my face, then at his envelope, then at the blue halo still glowing. "Ma'am, would you like to relocate to the quiet car?" Translation: "Do you want a room where your no can hear itself?" "Yes," I said. "And please note this interaction." He hesitated, then nodded. "Paperwork has cousins wherever institutions do." The man stood, bristling. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Hard is how you know it's built to last," I answered. He lowered his voice until it sounded like a hallway. "People will be disappointed." "People can be disappointed in daylight," I said, "but only in daylight." He tried one more angle, fear dressed in coat and calendar. "There will be fees." "There will also be me," I said, and that seemed to surprise him. I gathered my bag, my notebook, my patience. The attendant guided me toward the quiet car like a lighthouse moving on legs. Behind us, the envelope rustled again and then settled, convinced for the moment by gravity. As we reached the vestibule, I turned and met the man's eyes without malice and without permission. "Tomorrow," I said, "room with windows, witnesses." The doors parted. Colder air told the truth, simple as steel. He reached for the forms. I reached for the attendant light, chose for us. Outside the tunnel, the trains stacked like plates in a busy kitchen. Stop, inch, stop. Every phone lit with someone's emergency. Mine bloomed with the deadline dressed in numbers. 48 hours. Then the Adon's lost claim. Medical risk, legal fees. The closer we came to the city, the more their vocabulary tried to own my pulse. Office open until midnight. One message sang, as if availability were morality. I answered none of it. I wrote my own list instead. Daylight, neutral room, witnesses, corrected paper, apology in writing, public notice, clean routing. I printed each item as if the letters were a ladder. I could climb this. My hands stopped shaking on the third rung. Across the aisle, a teenager drummed anxiety on a backpack. A night shift nurse slept sitting up. A busker's harmonica leaked through a door. Stubborn and human. In crowded waiting, courage has to fit between elbows. I made mine small and dense, like a good loaf. Another calm new voice. Same script. "We're trying to help," she insisted. "Help often arrives with scissors." "Daylight," I said. "Windows." She tried to sweeten it. "We can do the first page now and tidy later." I smiled where she couldn't see me. "Later tidies people away." The train crawled under a river that never learned anyone's name, and didn't need to. We rose into a forest of steel. I could feel the city asking for my hurry, the way it asks for your exact change. I counted my change differently. Breath, paper, witnesses, rule, texts, then a group thread. Be reasonable. Think about him. Think about us. I did, and I thought about me, the person who has to live with the signature. We teach people how to treat our names by how we carry them. Mine travels upright. The conductor's final announcement crackled. Track 10, short 12. We exhaled together. A human accordion. I stood, waited for the aisle to thin, then stepped off into the fluorescent weather, without donating my decision to it. At the top of the escalator, a man with a clipboard lifted it like a flag. I walked past as if he were handing out coupons for a store I don't shop at. Near the rotunda, I stopped beneath the old clock and phoned the number that kept promising ease. No midnight, I said. No platforms. Noon tomorrow. Your conference room. Blinds up. Copier working. Witnesses present. Email the corrected draft now and bring paper. Silence. Then the shuffling sound of someone deciding between pride and procedure. Noon, he agreed, like it cost him a coat. I texted Mara, tomorrow. Glassroom. Bring cookies. She sent back a heart that looked like it was learning. People flowed around Merivale's departures, the music of a city that believes in motion. I stood still enough to hear my rule hum. I took out the shortbread and broke it in half for myself. Waiting can be crowded and still be brave. If I am judged for being slow, that judgment can stand in daylight next to me. If I am judged for rushing, I will be alone with the wreck. If I wait, they'll call me cruel. If I don't, I'll call myself something worse. Morning put the city in its glass close. We met in a waiting room with walls that preferred honesty, windows on 3 sides, the Hudson blinking like a tired witness. The pastor arrived first, hat in his lap, prayer in his posture. I'll pray with my eyes open, he said, the way he always does when paper is about to claim it knows more than people. The clerk came next, pen behind her ear, a tote full of forms that smelled like toner and truth. We took attendance, light witnesses, copies. I slid the packet across the table. We read aloud because words behave better when they have to walk around the room. First clause, silence counted as consent after a reasonable time. Reasonable to whom? Second, a shortcut that offered speed in exchange for appeal. I pointed. The clerk underlined. The pastor hummed a note. That means not yet. Third, a paragraph that moved risk like luggage to the smallest name on the page. Mine. Convenient. The clerk said softly, the way a nurse says deep breath before the stitch. I felt heat rise, but not anger. Clarity. The kind that tightens a bolt you didn't know was loose. My role no decisions after dark did not look stubborn in this room. It looked like a seatbelt. If I had signed on track 10, we would be arguing now with a pen already guilty. I laid down the timeline I'd written on the train. Texts, calls, the don't come message with its times. I placed a printout of my request for daylight beside their rush for midnight. Next to it, the copied minutes we found missing from their folder but present in my name's motions. The part where a discussion became a decision, in the kind of silence that hopes you're too tired to notice. We took a breath, then turned the paper into furniture that could hold weight. Same purpose, I said, pulling my draft forward. Cleaner verbs. We replaced assumed with documented. We restored appeal so tomorrow could still speak. We killed inferred consent. If they needed my name, they would have to meet it awake. We routed payments cleanly, with no strings hiding in bows. We required a written apology, not as punishment, but as a lesson for the room, and a public notice. So rumor would stop eating the town for lunch. The pastor tapped the table twice his version of a gavel. This will preach, he said, meaning, this will stand. The clerk made her marks with a satisfied economy, then checked boxes only she knew existed. This is the copy you want, she said, sliding the corrected draft to the top like a tray of bread ready for the oven. I looked out at the river, sun caught on ripples like receipts catching at the counter. I remembered every late night I'd mistaken urgency for love, every hallway where someone said we'll fix it later, every room with blinds shut against what morning knows. That's when the fear left and something better took its C-turns. I initialed the margins we would not surrender, the lines that would not move even if a storm shoved. The clerk stamped, dated. The pastor wrote the word witness as if it were his first and middle name. A copier hummed the way a hive does when the queen is safe. The city flashed another headline no one would remember by dinner. We restacked the pile until it looked like order. I closed the folder, felt the hinge at my spine grow strong, and smiled a small smile that fit my face. All right, I said to the room that had tried to be a maze, we're ready. What they called urgency was a shortcut around my dignity. I built the proof like a quilt square by square, story by story, with seams that would not lie. Metro timestamps first, tap in, pout, the minutes they said I was available while my card proved I was under a river. Next, email threads with subject lines that changed like disguises. Update, quick check, just confirming but kept the same ask. Now, I printed them all and circled the places where my no stood upright. Calendar invites came next. The phantom meetings added to look like consensus. I added ATM camera times from the receipt that captured me buying coffee across town at the exact hour a discussion allegedly made me present. Facts have a way of shaking hands with one another when you invite them to the same table. In my wallet sleeve, thin as a secret, I found a pencil line from my late spouse, written years ago after a rough winter of almost accidents and near mistakes. Slow is not refusal. Slow is repair. I placed that sentence on top like a warm towel. Each ally cost courage. I asked the station agent to pull a copy of last night's service alerts. He shrugged, then printed the sheet without sermon. I called an old supervisor who dislikes noise but loves fairness. She verified that the efficiency clause had no business near my name. I texted Mara, "Bring cookies, bring your eyes." She answered with a photo of a bakery bag and a heart that was trying very hard. Each ask spent a relationship chip. Some faces cooled. A cousin said I was making drama. I wrote receipts in my notebook and underlined it. Drama is what people call detail when they benefited from your blur. The city brightened, steam off manhole covers, buses kneeling, a saxophone auditioning for Mercy Underground. The work did not shrink. I numbered exhibits like a woman who has learned to respect the alphabet, A through G, then H for the humane alternative, typed clean. I stapled carefully because ragged edges make even truths look tired. One more voicemail, tried its luck. If we had your signature, we could release funds this afternoon. Release is a lovely verb when it unhooks a bird. It is suspicious when it unhooks your guardrails. I pressed delete and pressed print at the same time. A choreography I recommend by late morning. The folder had a spine. Papers lay flat. Clips held. Corners agreed. I packed water, throat lozenges, a spare pen, and the pencil line from the wallet, now copied and tucked in the front sleeve, where I could touch it without ceremony. I whispered the count like a recipe. Rules, receipts, grace. At the elevator, I looked at the stairwell and chose stairs because today I was training muscles I want later. One signature could end this. Or end me. I chose work now over regret later, and carried the folder like bread. Pressure arrived in matching outfits. Family first, wearing concern like a uniform. Today or never. Keep it in the family. Don't embarrass us. I answered with a sentence that doesn't raise its voice. Boundaries keep love trustworthy. Then came the quiet settlement. Numbers tidy as a hotel bed. Silence tucked tight. Quiet is expensive when it asks you to pay with your name. Group chats swelled a chorus of cousins and spectators. Rumor appointed itself foreman, built a scaffold, and invited everyone to climb. Screenshots traveled faster than trains. I closed my phone like a window in a storm and opened my notebook instead. On paper, panic loses volume. I regrounded at a diner with chrome edges and coffee that knew my order. I took the corner booth where light falls soft and made my stack again. Rules, receipts, grace. Rules to hold the room steady. Receipts to hush the doubt. Grace to keep me human enough to open the door when this is over. I sharpened my pencil until it made the sound of a tiny bell. The waitress set down lemon pie like an apology from the universe. "You want me to run interference if somebody comes in loud?" she asked, glancing at the door. "I want you to keep my coffee hot," I said. "I'll keep the rest warm." We smiled like women who have stood on platforms and refused the wrong trains. The ultimatum pinged. Again. Sign first page now. We'll tidy later. Later is where houses lose their pictures and families lose their address books. I sent the same reply, copied and pasted to save my kindness for daylight. No night decisions. Witnesses. Corrected paper. Public notice. Then, I put the phone face down and let the diner's ordinary holiness do its job. Forks, refills, the bell at the pass. I pulled out my tools highlight. Sticky flags. A small ruler that keeps the right margin honest. A craftsperson respects edges. I prepped for the meeting like a carpenter. Measure twice, cut once, sand the splinters. Alone at the booth, I said the prayer that fits in a whisper. Let truth be audible. Let my voice be kind. Let my note be clean. The radiator hissed back, "Amen." Outside, a bus sighed and kneeled for someone who needed a step. The city, for a moment, felt like it had learned my rule. Evening would come with its tricks, but I had morning on my side, and a room with glass, and people who would write witness beside their names. If they won't sit with grace, I'll sit with God. He keeps office hours I can live with, and he prefers daylight. It was 3 in the morning. the honest hour, when hotel carpets confess, and even elevators stop pretending to be brave. I kept the desk lamp low so the room could hear me think. Steam rose from paper cups like shy saints. I sat at the little rolling chair that rattled when I breathed, and rested both palms on wood too thin for secrets. Lord, I said without saying, stand between me and my hurry. The radiator ticked like a pocket metronome for courage. I looked at the single place setting napkin cup, 1 spoon in. Felt the surprising peace I had first tasted years ago when I set one bowl and let Quia eat with me. The old erasures patted in, the ones that always show up at 3, the almosts I apologized for, the polite disappearances I performed to keep rooms comfortable. I let them stand instead of giving them chairs. They thinned under the light. I opened the folder and laid out paper like a map you intend to walk at daylight. Yellow pad, blunt pen, the pencil line I keep from my late spouse, tucked in a sleeve. Slow is not refusal. Slow is repair. I wrote my terms again in block letters so my pulse would have something square to lean against. Daylight meeting, neutral room, witnesses with pens, corrected agreement, written apology, public acknowledgement, clean routing of money with no strings hiding in bows. I read them aloud and the radiator kept time. I added smaller lines beneath the big ones, copies for everyone leaving the room, blinds up, names spelled correctly, appeal preserved in ink, not rumor. I drew a box around the word daylight and colored it in with patience. When my hand shook, I stilled it on the desk and breathed in counts of 3. The way nurses teach when walls lean. Memory tried to sell me shortcuts in sentimental wrapping. Do it for him. Do it for peace. Do it to be done. I answered with straight sentences a tired woman can carry. Do it right. Do it once. Do it where morning can testify. I let grief sit nearby like an old neighbor and did not make it tea. We have spoken before. We understand each other's work. I phoned the front desk to confirm a copier at 10 and a lobby corner with windows. The clerk, half asleep but kind, set a note for day shift. I set one for mine. Be the calmest person in every room. I tucked the shortbread into my bag like mercy for later and lined my pens like small soldiers who hoped never to fight. I wrote a small prayer on the hotel stationery, not for outcomes but for posture. Let my voice be kind and unsurrendered. Let my note be clean. Let my yes be earned. Let me honor the tired people who are doing their jobs and defend the edge where my name lives. I slipped the card into my wallet behind the room key, a promise I would touch right before pens appeared. I packed my shoes with the good tread, the jacket that remembers victories, and a square of chocolate, because sugar can help a backbone. I set my watch to noon and trusted the minutes. Exact dot, when even the radiator surrendered, silence finally stood up straight. I closed the folder, drew the curtain just enough to let a slice of city blue in, and watched the streetlights argue themselves into dawn. The rule inside my ribs breathed once and settled. At dawn, I set 1 cup. It was enough. Morning opened like a well-made door. I laced my shoes and stood inside my plan until it fit. First call, the bank. No platforms, no midnight, I said. Room with windows, blinds up, copier working, witnesses seated, corrected language printed before pens uncapped. The manager cleared his throat in corporate and answered in human. 10 o'clock, he said. Conference room east. Second call, the attorney. We will not proceed on assumptions, I said. Replace inferred consent with documented agreement. Restore appeal. Route payments, cleaned. Apology in writing. Public notice. He tried to counter with convenience until it heard itself. Noon, he said. Room with glass. Third call, the pastor. I'll pray with my eyes open, he said, and bring a pen. The clerk texted a photo of her toe tabs forms, a stapler that means business. Mara sent a cookie selfie from the corner bakery. I noted the reporter's number available if needed. I printed one more copy of the humane alternative and slid it into the folder front. I put the pencil line from my late spouse behind my ID so my hand would brush it when I reached for proof. Slow is not refusal. Slow is repair. I zipped my bag, slipped on the jacket that remembers victories, and checked the mirror for steadiness. The concourse swallowed me and then agreed to spit me out in the right place. I moved through schedules and suitcases with the patience of a woman who has already decided. At the information kiosk, I asked directions I didn't strictly need, just to hear my own voice behave. Up the stairs, left at the newsstand, the clerk said dot at the bank. The receptionist pointed me toward glass that faced the street. I requested water, a copy of everything on the table, and a chair where I could see the door. The manager arrived with the look of a man revising himself. "We'll start on the corrected draft," he said before I asked. We waited for the others. By noon, we had rooms, times, copies, witnesses, and a plan you could lift with both hands. The attorney set down his briefcase. The pastor set his hat on the credenza like respect has weight. The clerk uncapped her pen and turned it into a gavel. Mara placed the cookies between us. I checked the blinds, they were up. I checked the copy ready. I placed the corrected pages on top and laid a spare pen beside each chair. We reviewed the agenda like adults who expect clarity. My hands steadied on the folder's spine. The room felt prepared, not theatrical. Trains agreed. My boundary walked into the room ahead of me and shook hands. The bridge followed, boards tested, railings firm. They said today or never. I said today by my terms. Conference room east tried to look taller than it was. Glass walls, chrome handles, a table polished enough to reflect second thoughts. I chose the chair with the window at my back so daylight would touch the paper first. The pastor set his hat down like a benediction. The clerk squared her pad and clicked her pen once, a sound that told the room which side of careful we were on. Mara slid a small box of cookies to the center and said nothing, which is how friends cheered during surgery. The manager entered with a folder that had learned humility overnight. The attorney followed, chin-height papers under his arm like a tame bird. He began with choreography. "We appreciate your time. We can move quickly." And I cut in with the instrument I brought. "Order. We'll move cleanly," I said. "First, the timeline." I laid it out like a carpenter's chalk line. Text at 8:47 p.m., voicemail at 8:51, my replies requesting daylight at 9:06, the barrage between 9:30 and 11:15, the approach to pen, the escalator clock, the call scheduling this room, receipts, not drama. The clerk compared headers. The pastor hummed approval at the parts where names were spelled correctly. The manager's jaw relaxed one notch. Next, the omissions dressed as courtesy. I slid the draft across and placed sticky flags where the paper tried to choose my future in the dark. "Here," I said, tapping the clause that equated silence with consent. "Replace assumed with documented and define how documentation will occur." The attorney tried industry standard. I tried human standard. The clerk wrote, "Documented" in tidy block letters and boxed it. "Here," I said, "restore appeal. It is not a luxury. It is tomorrow's voice." The attorney frowned. The manager surprised himself by nodding. "Restore it," he said. The pen moved like a small engine catching. "Here," I continued, "remove inferred consent entirely. I will not have my quiet repurposed as agreement." The pastor said, "Amen," not loud, not for show, just where it belonged. The attorney drew a line, and the paragraph died with a soft scratch. "We came to money next." "Rooting," I said, and slid forward the page where convenience tried to take a cut it hadn't earned. "Clean paths only, no detours that forget who owns the map." The manager leaned over the draft. "She's right," he said, the sentence landing like a weight on the right side of the table. Snow melt pooled by the door, where people had shaken their boots. In the glass it looked like pressure losing its home. "And here," I said, turning to the last page, "written apology for the rush, disguised as mercy, and a public notice correcting the record, not a trophy, a receipt the town can read." The attorney began a speech that had gathered dust in a drawer. Reputations, misunderstandings, the burden of process. I lifted a hand the way a traffic officer saves lives. "This is not shame, this is repair." The clerk's pen hovered, then wrote apology, notice on 2 separate lines, as if she were making room at a table. Mara slid the cookie box and inched toward the attorney. He declined, which is its own kind of confession. We ran the copier. It chugged and warmed the air with the smell of second chances. The clerk stamped the corrected pages. The manager checked the routing, scratched out a detour, and initialed the clean path. The attorney tested one more door. We could proceed now and file a rider later, and found it locked. "Later," I said, "is where people misplace their names." He let the handle go. We signed in an order that honored sense. Institution first, oversight, witnesses, and then me. I wrote my name in print that fit the page, neither whisper nor trumpet. The pastor placed his palm near the signatures, a silent prayer that ink would remember its job. The clerk finished with a staple that sounded like a hinge set correctly at last. The room exhaled. Outside, a bus hissed and kneeled for a passenger. I gathered my copies, measured not by thickness, but by relief. The manager cleared his throat, found the ordinary voice beneath the professional one, and said, Thank you for insisting. He held my gaze as if receiving instruction. We'll run the notice tomorrow. The attorney tried to tidy his pride. We can make this right publicly or quietly, he said. Publicly, I answered. We left the glass room with paper that told the truth without adjectives. The clerk slid my copies into a firm envelope and wrote the date twice on the flap. The manager walked us to the door and shook my hand like a person who had learned something useful. On the sidewalk, winter sun leaned its shoulder into the city and made it kinder for a block or two. The notice ran the next morning in a small column between church dinners and a lost dog request. Correction issued. Agreement amended. Protections restored. Apology recorded. No fanfare. Just a footbridge the town could cross without drama. I clipped it, folded it neat, and tucked it beside the index card in my bread tin. The apology arrived on letterhead that didn't try to smell expensive plain sentences. An admission of rush. A commitment to windows up and blinds open next time. I put that in the tin too. Not as a trophy, as a tool. Funds moved along the clean route we drew with boxy letters. I paid the bill that had been standing on one foot and the smaller one that always hides behind it. I mailed a check to the library with foilite on the memo line and asked the librarian to buy better bulbs for the reading tables. She held my hand between both of hers and said the children would notice. At home, ordinary repairs waited their turn like good neighbors. The loose stair we had shimmed 3 times got a proper fix-rise run. The door that coughed in winter got a new sweep. I bought red-tipped tulips because houses understand when you mark a season with color. They stood in a jar like a small parade for patience. Reconciliations arrived in mixed weather. A cousin texted a sentence that did not try to win. You did it right. I invited her for soup and made the good bread. A neighbor waved from behind his windshield. The simple handshake of men who do not need nouns. Mara came by with lemon bars and an apology that tasted like relief. We ate 1 each and wrapped 2 for later. You were careful, she said, and I heard her retire the word stubborn. Not everyone came back. Some ties had been twined. I left them on the hook without malice. My table set itself without keeping score. On Sunday, I added a second place setting for someone who asked the right way in daylight, with questions, ready to listen. We ate slowly. He said the words that come easy and the ones that come slow. I remembered that forgiveness wears shoes and walks around the block before it sits down. The house learned a calmer weather. The heater ticked with contentment. The window lost its habit of waiting for trouble and returned to framing the view. When I turned the phone face down at night, it felt like a practice, not a warning. When I turned it over in the morning, it felt like mail, not a trial. A week later, an envelope arrived, addressed in a hand that had rushed before and now was trying to write carefully. Inside, not forms, a letter. Could we talk at your table? A small box to check yes, in daylight. I smiled at whoever had designed that option, then at the person who had chosen it. I set the letter beside the tulips and let both open at their own pace. A letter arrived later this time asking for a seat, not a signature. Come close, sweetheart. This is where I fold the map and tell you what the road meant. A boundary is a promise you keep in public. It isn't a wall against love. It's a door frame that lets love come in without knocking you down. Write your rules where your hands can touch them. No decisions after dark. Windows up. Witnesses seated. Copies carried out. When rooms get loud, touch the wood. Grace is not pretending nothing went wrong. Grace tells the truth, fixes the board, and still sets a chair for whoever comes in daylight with clean hands. Mercy does not erase memory. It repairs it so we can use it. Patience is not passivity. Patience is the slow courage to gather receipts, read every line, and let morning give you better eyes. Paper isn't suspicion. Paper is memory you can hold. Keep receipts, keep minutes, keep your own voice on the record. Persistence is the chore nobody notices while you're doing it. The third email, the second draft, the quiet insistence on glass rooms and working copiers. It looks small until you realize the roof stayed up. My version of Americanness sounds like neighbors who show up, clerks who tap the math, managers who can say she's right, and pastors who pray with their eyes open. It reads like corrections printed beside bake sales and Little League scores. It looks like trains that run and rules that hold. And a woman who says not at night and is heard. Love that asks you to vanish isn't love. It's convenience wearing your coat. Real love waits with you. It signs its own name. It meets you at noon. It helps you carry the folder and washes the coffee cups afterward. Waiting can be holy when words would only stir the storm. Turn the phone face down. Let the night finish its paragraph. Choose the name you must live with over the noise that wants to rent it by the hour. If you have to stand alone, stand at your table. The people who know you will recognize you there now. Tell me in the comments where you learned to wait with courage. Tell me which sentence you'll tape inside your wallet, and which neighbor you'll bring when it's time to celebrate repair. If this steadied your hands, subscribe and share it with someone who keeps mistaking kindness for surrender. I'll be here next Sunday at dusk with another grandmother story playing American, grateful to daylight, and ready to set one cup or two as wisdom requires. There's one more story this table could tell. If you'll sit with me next Sunday. By Sunday the comments changed their weather. The first ones had teeth. These had hands. I spoke too soon, one neighbor wrote. Thank you for teaching pause. At church, the bulletin tucked my name between casseroles and choir rehearsal. Persistence with grace. Small letters, big relief. The cashier at the corner bodega slid a folded note under my receipt. Proud of you. Mem then rang up the next customer, as if nothing holy had happened. By the station, the bank manager lifted 2 fingers from his steering wheel. A quiet salute that said, "We corrected ITAN learn. Online." The rumor thread cooled like steam off a winter platform. A cousin posted. She waited, and daylight told the truth. Hearts tapped softly instead of hard. The librarian stamped for light on a donation slip and said the reading tables would shine warmer now. Even the neighbor who prefers gossip to gardening waved from her stoop and asked about tulips. Not trouble. I clipped the public notice from the paper, squared its corners, and tucked it into the bread tin beside my penciled creed. I rested my palm on the lid so the house could feel my thanks. Word traveled farther than I set the table for. Evening forgives the city again. I tilt the lamp a finger's width and let the room wear gold. I set 1 cup at my place and breathe. The second waits patient in the cupboard, available by choice, not demand. The window holds its blue dusk. The porch light clicks on with the confidence of a rule kept. I rinse the day from a spoon and leave it on the towel to dry. Testimony that ordinary has returned and intends to stay. The phone rests face down until morning. If somebody needs my hurry, they can ask the light first. I check the lock, not from fear but from respect, and pulled the curtain just enough to let the sky finish its sentence. Far off, a horn threads the night metal, singing promise, not command. I open the bread tin and find the small archive, the apology, on letterhead, the clipped correction, the index card that says daylight decides. I touch them like prayer beads and put them back where patience can find them. Steam rises from the kettle. I sit, sip, and let gratitude choose the pace. The house keeps its soft rhythm. The street keeps its honest noise. The city and I have made our peace for tonight. Next week, I'll tell you about the ticket stub tucked inside a postcard with no return address. If this steadied your hands, subscribe, like, and share it with someone who keeps mistaking kindness for surrender. I'm here every Sunday at dusk with another grandmother story plain American and told in daylight. Next time, we open a postcard with no return address, a ticket stub hidden inside, and a lesson about the difference between warning and welcome light. Bring your chair, your patience, and your own brave rule. If this gave you courage, come back at dusk. Subscribe next story at dusk. Thank you. Be good to your neighbors. Porch lights on, soft music holds fade.